Adil, that's fine. Adil, you want to show you why it's haram in your books? Okay. In Usul al-Kafi, listen to this. In Usul al-Kafi. Yeah, of course it's sahih. Listen.
According to your say.
No, to your book. To your book here. Here. من آت العقول. He said the hadith موثق حسن. It's correct. It's sound hadith. He says, النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام said, لا تلطمن خدا ولا تخمشن وجها ولا تنفتن شعرا ولا تتشققن جيبا ولا تسودن ثيبا. Do not cry loudly. Do not rip your clothes. And do not wear black clothes. Here, in your book, Usul Kafi. Why you wearing black clothes? It's in your book.
Why are you wearing blue?
Blue. You wear it because it's deaf. No, you wear it because
Why are you wearing black? I'm not Shia.
No, you wear it because of deaf.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على محمد وآله الطاهرين. We saw in that clip the Nasibi preacher in London called Shamsi trying to dissuade certain Shi'i individuals he was talking with of mourning for Imam Hussain alayhi salam by citing a hadith from Al-Kafi al-Sharif. The hadith is actually found in volume 5 of Al-Kafi, book number 3, chapter 167, under the chapter heading of the Holy Prophet's forming allegiance with women. In this hadith, the Prophet took allegiance from certain women of Quraysh, including the mother of Muawiyah, and based on the injunction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given to the Prophet in Surah number 60, verse 13, the Prophet actually ordered them that they must not slap their faces or abrade their faces or pull out their hair or tear apart a part of a shirt, blackened clothes, that's to wear blackened clothes, and you must not cry woe to me. Now, why these people in the time of Jahiliyyah used to do this is a different discussion, and why we do what we do is a different discussion. But based on this hadith, the question is there anywhere in this hadith where it says, for example, this is an outright prohibition? For example, when we see in the Quran, when Allah is telling you not to do certain things, or even in the Sunnah, there are things which are nahi, which are suspension, there are things which are makruh, which are disliked, and there are things which are outright haram or outright prohibitions. So based on this hadith, can we say, the Prophet is actually given an outright prohibition? It's not explicit over here, at least based on this hadith at face value. So now the question goes on, can we use this hadith as Shamsi is doing in order to relate it to the Shias who actually mourn for Imam Hussain alayhi salam? The answer is no. The answer is no, because we have numerous hadiths in our books and numerous chapters whereby the Imams alayhim salam, they have actually demonstrated that mourning for Imam Hussain is an exception. For example, the book of Shaykh al-Hur al-Amili rahmatullahi alayh, which is called Al-Fusul al-Muhimma fi Usul al-A'imma, volume 3, page 413, there is a chapter heading that indeed every grief is actually makruh, it is disliked, except what is made an exception. This is the chapter heading. So the chapter heading in itself is a message. Then on the page, you find a hadith of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam making this exception. And there are other ahadiths under this chapter. The Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam is reported to have said, every grief and crying is forbidden except the grief and crying for the killing of Al-Hussein alayhi salam. So a clear, explicit hadith. So you cannot use that hadith, which, can be applied maybe in other situations, to apply it on the mourning for Imam Hussein, because in our books we have explicit hadiths from the Imams with explicit chapter headings making it clear that the mourning for Imam Hussain alayhi salam is an exception which is actually made permissible, and it is even encouraged. And this encouragement can also be found in Kamil al-Ziyarat. So in Kamil al-Ziyarat, for example, in book number 2, chapter 32, there is a chapter heading, or there is the chapter heading here, which says the reward for those who cry over Hussain ibn Ali, alayhi salam. So the chapter heading here is reward for those who cry over Hussain ibn Ali. So there is an entire chapter that you can actually cry for Imam Hussain and you will be rewarded. So how can this Jahil, who doesn't know anything about the Shia faith, he doesn't know about Shia Hadith, he cherry picks out one Hadith and then he tries to apply it as a general ruling when there is actually an exception. So in this chapter, for example, in Hadith number 2, let's see what Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam said. He said, crying and jaza' is makruh for the slaves of Allah over any matter, except crying and jaza' over Hussain ibn Ali alayhi salam. Verily, the one who cries and acts impatiently over Hussain alayhi salam will be rewarded. In Arabic it says, عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام قال سمعته يقول إن البكاء والجزع مكروه للعبد في كل ما جزع ما خلا البكاء والجزع على الحسين بن علي عليه السلام فإنه فيه مأجور. So very clear, we can actually mourn for Imam Hussain. It's not only permissible, but it will be rewarded. And of course, if we take also into account the hadith of Imam Rida alayhi salam, where the Imam had said, he said, may Allah have mercy on those who revive our legacy or our matter or our memory, the Ahlul Bayt. So Imam Rida alayhi salam, he's even doing supplication. He said, Rahimallahu man ahya amrana Ahlul Bayt. May Allah have mercy on the one who revives our amr, our command, our legacy, our memory, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So, just to recap a bit, in the first hadith, which Shamsi is actually pointing out, there is nowhere in the hadith that explicitly forbids grieving. Nowhere. Okay, explain that it's like outright forbidden. It's not mentioned. Then the prohibitions by the Prophet could be haram, outright, could be temporary nahi, suspension, could be makruh. And the last two do not necessarily mean outright haram. Also, since Shamsi has actually opened this door on himself, we should show Shamsi the hadith of his mother Aisha slapping her face and crying when the Prophet ﷺ passed and when her father passed away. So she did not only do it once, she did it twice. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, in the time of the death of Abu Bakr, he came to beat the women in order to stop them from mourning. So was Aisha, for example, a Jahila and someone who belonged to the Jahiliyyah? So Shamsi will have to first judge Aisha. If he can do that and he's sincere, then we can talk about, what makes, for example, the Shias mourn for Imam Hussain, which, evidently I'm also explaining that we have exceptions based on hadith from the Imams, and of course, based on the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. We find in both Sunni and Shia hadith that before the martyrdom of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, when the news that Imam Hussain will be martyred in the future was actually given to the Prophet as a prophecy, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, he cried. So if crying for somebody who is dead or who will die or somebody's death, generally speaking, if this was something that was, forbidden, the Prophet wouldn't have done it, because the Prophet in both Sunni and Shia hadith, he actually cried. Thus, you have, the hadith in line with the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. You have the hadith of the A'imma, the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, like for example, the two hadiths I've mentioned from Imam as-Sadiq, that every grief is actually disliked. Not forbidden. He said disliked. It is makruh, except the jaza' or the grief or grieving over Imam Hussein's killing alayhi salam. So now, when it comes to his mother Aisha, for example, if we go to Musnad Ahmad, volume 43, page 368 to 369, she said that the Prophet passed away on her chest in this hadith. So she said that the Prophet passed away on her chest, which, by the way, we have to, we have to object to, because we don't believe the Prophet actually passed away on her chest. There's another hadith in Al-Mustadrak, the book of Al-Hakim, Al-Mustadrak ala Sahihain, whereby Salama alayha salam, the mother of the believers, she said that the Prophet actually died on the lap or on the chest of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So we don't accept this claim of Aisha or the claim that is attributed to her. But anyway, to go on, not to go off topic, she said here that the Prophet passed away on her chest, and from her stupidity and immaturity. She said, from my stupidity and immaturity, that when the Prophet passed away, I placed his head on a pillow. So the Prophet died, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, and Aisha took a pillow and placed it under his head. And she's calling herself stupid and immature. Now, this is significant because they take the Sunnah from this woman. So at the time the Prophet passed away, and the action she actually carried out, she calls it stupid and immature. But they still take the Sunnah and their religion from this stupid and immature person, based on what she is calling herself. So anyway, she went on to say that, or she said that I then got up with the women doing latum, hitting oneself and hitting my face. She said, وَقُمْتُ أَلْتَدِمُ مَعَ النِّسَاءِ وَأَضْرِبُ وَجْهِي. She was hitting her face. She was al-tadim. Al-tadim is latum, is another word for latum. Anyway, in Tarikh al-Tabari, volume 3, page 423, from narrated Yunus bin Wahab, from Yunus bin Yazid, from Az-Zuhri, from Sa'id bin Musayyib, who said when Abu Bakr died, Aisha held a mourning gathering. She held a mourning gathering for him, in which eulogies had been read. Umar ibn al-Khattab was informed of it, so he came to her door and forbade them of mourning on Abu Bakr. The women refused, so Umar said to Hisham ibn al-Walid, enter and bring out for me the daughter of Abi Quhafa, the sister of Abu Bakr. When Aisha heard this, she said to Hisham, I forbid you from entering into my house. Umar ibn al-Khattab said to Hisham, enter, I allow you to do that. So Hisham entered and brought out Farwa, the sister of Abu Bakr, to Umar. So Umar started beating her with his whip for a while. When the mourners heard this, they escaped. So, Aisha again engaging in a mourning gathering. Tayyib. This hadith is also significant because this same person who is permitting Hisham ibn al-Walid to enter into the house of Aisha, this same person entered into the house of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. He attacked the house of the daughter of the Prophet. Here he's attacking the house of Aisha. So, if he can do it to the house of Sayyidah Fatima, why can't he do it to the house of Aisha? And if he's doing it here to the house of Aisha, why couldn't he have done it to the house of Fatima alayhi salam? And not only that, they brought out Farwa, the sister of Abu Bakr, and he started whipping her. The question is, why didn't he whip Aisha? Why this poor woman, the sister of Abu Bakr, he was whipping her? So anyway, based on these two hadiths, we see that Aisha was partaking in mourning ceremonies, and in the first hadith from Musnad Ahmad, she was actually hitting her face and all that. So this is actually very, very important in refuting Shamsi, because in Bukhari, for example, 1294, there's a clear hadith that you're not supposed to do certain practices which are the practices of Jahiliyyah. So in Hadith 1294 of Sahih Bukhari, narrated Abdullah the Prophet is quoted to have said, "He who slaps his cheeks, tears his clothes, and follows the ways and traditions of the days of ignorance or Jahiliyyah is not one of us." Now, it means Aisha is not one of this ummah based on her actions of slapping her cheeks. Why do I say this? Because going by this hadith in Bukhari 1294, our Sunni brothers, unlike us, the Shias, they do not have other hadiths which are an exception to the rule. Like for example, we have the hadiths or the multiple hadiths which I've mentioned two of them, that every jaza or every grieving is actually disliked, except the grieving over Imam Hussain. So we have an exception to the rule that for Imam Hussain alayhi salam, jaza is actually permissible, grieving is actually permissible. But in the case of our Sunni brothers, they don't have an exception to the rule. So in other words, Aisha has actually broken the rule. She actually partake in act of Jahiliyyah. And you don't have hadith like the Shias that every grieving is forbidden except grieving for Abu Bakr, a Sahabi, or grieving for the Prophet. No. So, before you throw stones, Mr. Shamsi, you have to first see that you live in a glass house. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.